Welcome to Tobar's Realm. So I've been working on this for about a week, and for some reason I didn't record any of it, so I'm kind of doing a catch-up here in the middle. What I'm working on is a small replica of a Roman Ballista that is designed to shoot arrows, and what I'm making it out of is oak scrap that I scavenged off of a couch I disassembled, and I just used the chop saw to cut some strips approximately 1/4 inch thick and made this little box basically, which will house the arms that will eventually have a bowstring across it. And I plan on using this sinew to power those arms. I've been working on the arm of it here. This has like a T-slot in there that will hold the mechanism for pulling the string back and the trigger. I'm currently working on the back part where the little winch part will be. I'm working on the ratcheting part of the wheel that will go on here for cranking it back. I'm going to mount these little strips on the side that will house that part. And I got the hardest part done, which was the trigger. So I kind of started off just going through some scrap stuff. This was a trailer hitch plug, I believe, that I tried figuring something out with. That didn't work out. Had these little mounting hooks for like a window curtain rod. That didn't work out. I started messing with some 1/4 inch copper tubing. This one didn't work out. Ended up making this one designed to fit into that T slot. This one didn't end up working out, so I went back to tubing because I'm trying to make it as similar to the real trigger mechanism as possible. And here's what I ended up making. It's not quite done yet, but the way this works is it goes in there, this little toggle, go grab onto the string, this little block on here goes underneath that holds that, so you can put it on there. The ratchet will pull this back while it has tension on there, and then you can open this little release. So that was a difficult piece to make, but I'm happy with how it turned out. And this copper I'm using, this was all from 1/2 inch copper tubing. So like I said, now I'm working on the ratcheting system that will go here. I'm just cleaning up these teeth. This is actually 3 pennies that I soldered together and then marked so where I can put these teeth in it. So I'm just going to continue cleaning up these teeth till they're acceptable. Alright, well, I got the little ratcheting gear filed down, so it's pretty good. So now what I want to do is solder this together. I got a couple little pieces of solder there in between. I'm hoping that if I just heat up this screw, it'll be hot enough to melt it. Because the main thing I want to avoid is those pennies that are soldered together coming apart. So I'm just going to use this little propane tank, heat up the screw, and see what happens. I do have a metal plate under it, so if I need to, I'll put the flame on that. We'll just start by doing the screw itself and see. Guess not. Cool, those little pieces underneath just melted and it plopped down. Let that cool and check it out. Alright, continuing on with the ratcheting system, I got that soldered on there and cleaned up. I think it turned out pretty good. So that will be mounted through here, and then I also got this copper disc that I made out of a penny. Just got to make sure you use the older pennies that are pure copper. And for those, I just countersink a little hole in a piece of scrap wood and then just put it in there and sand that off until the stamp is gone. And then I poked a hole through the center of it. So that'll go on there, between there. Now I need to drill the hole in between these two wood pieces here. And then it's got that space for the spool up. And then on the inside here, I think I'm going to solder this little loop on here that I can tie the rope to it for when it turns. And then on this side, I need to put the drum where the handle will go to turn that. I have this little piece of 1/2-inch copper tubing I think I'm going to try to use. I'll have to figure that out, but first I'm going to drill these holes and get that lined out. Well, for some reason it didn't want to solder. I don't know if I messed up that coating it had on it when I did this one. It stuck to this one fine, but maybe it burned it off or whatever, but it didn't stick to it. So I just drilled a little hole and I'll put a little wire loop in there. Alright, I got the little loop in there. So that should work to hold that little piece of string for the rope. But the fact that it didn't solder is a little concerning for what I'm going to do on this side. So I'm thinking maybe I'll solder this together. And then wherever it mounts, I'll drill a hole through there, stick a wire, and then embed it in lead on the inside of this little drum. So then when it turns, the wire that's going through that will force it to turn, even if it doesn't stick to that surface. Alright, so here's my plan on this little drum. I drilled another little hole through there. And then I made a little piece that fits inside of this one, and I pre-marked it to where I want to drill the hole through it. So I think what I'm going to do is I'm just going to put a little bit of lead in the bottom of this, then I'll drill the hole, put it on there, and then I'll put a small piece of wire through that hole, and then I'll fill the rest of it up with lead that I'll just melt and drip directly in there, and hope for the best on that. Alright, well, I'm ready to put a little bit of lead in the bottom of this, and I'm just using the lead from tire weights for balancing tires. I think that'll work pretty good because it has zinc in it, which makes the lead a little harder than just regular lead. So I'm going to throw that in there and use a little propane torch. Shouldn't take much. Alright, I'll let that cool, and then I'll drill the hole through it, and then I'll fill the rest of it up just by dripping the lead into it. Alright, well, I got that little copper donut half filled with lead, and then I just put a little wire through the screw there. And now I'm going to use a torch to just drip lead into it and hopefully seal that up. Ratcheting system basically done. I think that turned out alright. I just sanded it down and took the rest of that screw off. Drilled some little holes in it in the drum. So I can use this little nail here, and then that can be used for that. And then something else I'm going to do is I just have this piece of wire that I bent and kind of flattened out there that I'm going to put right there. I'm going to drill some holes where that loops back on itself, and that's just to keep the rope up above that channel and protect it from that sharp edge. So I'll get that drilled and attached right there. So continuing on here, I got the one side done with the, I ended up using the sinew on this and just looped it back and forth as many times as I could fit in a 1/4 inch hole. And then the way these work is these nuts, I just ground a little groove in them and then drilled a hole through, so you can turn this to add a twist into that to tighten it, and then just put a little peg in here on each side. So this is actually pretty good. So I'm going to continue on the other side. It's kind of a pain to get started, but once you got it started, it's not too bad. So these nuts, like I said, it's the kind that has the built-in washer. I just ground a groove in it, and then I'm using this piece of nail to lay in that groove that the string will go around, and then ground little grooves on the edge so that pin can fit in, have a spot to go when it can't turn. So just continue trying to get this one started. Like I said, the beginning is the hardest part. Alright, I got it started pretty good there. That's a chore getting that, holding it all together while you're getting it tightened down, but I'm just going to continue going back and forth around it with as many of these wraps as I can do, and I just use a little tiny piece of wire I can stick through and then drag it through there. Just keep going back and forth until it's full. I didn't count how many wraps I did on that, but I just did it until I couldn't fit any more through it. So, and then I just try to keep it as tight as I can as I'm going. So I'll just continue doing that. Alright, I got those wraps all done. So now I need to get this arm seated in between those and get it to sit down on these grooves. It's too tight to just stick it in there, but I used a screwdriver on the other one and it seemed to work okay. Alright, as you can see, it's not tensioned yet, so now all I need to do is just turn these so it pushes it this way, and once I got it tensioned about the same, just put the little pins in there to hold those nuts from backing out. Kind of turn it. That feels about the same. Cool. Alright, so now I'm going to start on the little catch for the ratchet system, and I just made a little pattern here. Got a little tooth there that'll catch on the teeth of the ratchet, so something like that, so that when you turn it, it'll catch on each tooth there. And I'm just going to use this piece of scrap here that it's like, I don't know, 16th thick, maybe a little more, 2 millimeters, something like that. So I'm just going to put that pattern on there and cut it out and see how it goes. Alright, so I got the piece pretty much done as far as shaping it, and then that will be mounted on the side here, and then just gravity will lock that tooth down in there. Alright, well, I got all the wraps done and they're adjusted pretty evenly, and I just put a string on here to try it out and see if it works, and it does. Works pretty good actually. I just tied a little loop knot on the ends of these, and I think I'm going to go back and do an eyelet weave on this string. I'm actually using jute. That seems to be working all right. It's like a 3-strand twisted string, so I'm gonna try to do a eyelet weave back on itself. I'm not gonna even try to film that because I did it. I practiced one on this and it was very difficult because all the string looks the same and it's so small, but I'm gonna do that and see if I can get it the right length. Hopefully, I'm sure it'll be a headache, but that's my plan. So yeah, that works pretty good. Alright, well, I finally got that eyelet woven back on itself, eyelet weave. It took me like an hour and a half because it is just very difficult for me anyway. And then I also intertwined some strands in the middle just to make that a little bit wider for where it's gonna line up with the arrow. Here's the original one that just had a knot tied in it. Here's the one where it's laced back in itself. So now I think it's time to attach the front and the back together. So that's notched. I had to shim it up a little because I sanded it down too far. So I'm going to drill some holes through the bottom and into this, and then glue that together with some wooden pegs together plus the glue on there. I think that should be strong enough. So start on that. Alright, well, I got those drilled and glued with the toothpick pegs. So I'm just going to cut these off and sand that down. Alright, well, most of the hard work is done. It actually functions. Trigger mechanism's working. So I'll just do a little test fire here. So you just disengage this lock, and you can let out the rope to slide the trigger. Put that little grabber on the bow bowstring there. Set that little block under the trigger. Put the ratchet stop back on there. And then could use the little handle here to crank it. But you can just do it by hand actually, but that's the way it's supposed to work. So anyway, pull that back. So now it's tensioned, and then this is just a shish kebab skewer. I haven't made the arrows for it yet, but put that in, and I need to attach a little rope or something to the trigger, but it actually shoots pretty far. I'd say 20 feet or so. So at that point you can just pull the trigger. And there you go. So next I'm going to be working on armoring the front and sides. I made these at the very beginning actually, but I think now's the time to start getting them attached. Got these two plates that go on the front, and then I made some side pieces that'll go on here. And then for the corners, I've been thinking I'm going to use aluminum, just from an aluminum can. And I got these crafting scissors that I can use to cut like a neat edge on the side of it. And I was just practicing on this piece, so I'll bend it into a 90 like that, and then use these to cut a nice pattern in the corner of it and mount that on the edges. So I'm just gonna basically harvest this for the sheet of aluminum on here. Just carefully cut around it. And I just got the top and bottom cut off there, and got a sheet here. It's pretty easy to cut this stuff. Alright, so I got the aluminum cut out. It's alright, it's not perfect, but I think it'll work. So my plan is to put it around the edges like that. And just kind of trim around it. And I'm just going to use these little copper nails. I'll cut it off pretty short and then just glue them in there, drill the hole and glue them in there. Alright, well, I got all the trim done. I think it turned out pretty good. Makes it look a little nicer. So now it's time to start on the base, I think. So what I want to do is have like a swivel type turret, or not, swivel type mount, where it can traverse left and right and up and down. So I think I'm going to use some a 1/4 inch tubing and just smash it flat and then make kind of a U shape that I can mount on each side, and then mount it to the base. So I'll get started on that. Alright, so there's the tubing. I'm just going to start out by flattening it. Alright, so I've got the mount pretty much ready to go. I think what I'm going to do is solder this together and then drill a hole in the top of the base, and then that can turn in there, and then I'll probably cap it with the hole down the center, and then that can just sit right in there. Alright, so I got the pivot mounted on there. And the main post, I got the hole drilled in the top there. The idea will be that it can use that to aim it. And right now I'm just working on a piece to cover the top. I'll bend these tabs over, drill a hole in the center of it, and then attach it to the top here. As far as the base goes, I'm just going to kind of make a T-shape base, and for now I'm going to just work on this part. Okay, so carrying on with the base, this turned out pretty good, and then cut some more strips that I'm gonna notch those, kind of a cross shaped piece, notch those so they're flush together, and then mount that on here, and then put some little 45s to reinforce that. Alright, continuing onwards, getting pretty good progress on the base here. Got these little supports on the bottom and glued it at the base of this. I think I'm going to put some wooden pegs into the bottom too, just to reinforce it a little. But now it's time to start on these little supports that'll go here. And then I also have these little copper pieces that will be mounted at the bottom and top of those. So I'm starting to make the arrows for this, and I just have a shish kebab skewer that I cut at 4.5 inches long. This was my first attempt, and I glued some feathers on it for the fletching. These are just some feathers I got from our chicken coop. Not a great selection, and they're a little gross, but that's what I'm going to try and use. Alright, well, things are coming along nicely here. I got the base all done with the legs on it. Now, I think I'm going to add a small little rest on the bottom of it where it'll have a thing that it can hold it up. Videos I've seen of these, they had a little rest here. I guess they put it there when they're loading it, and then they take it off, and it's hinged at this side here, and it's just got a little spot that it sticks into. So the bottom of it, I'm just going to mount this little piece I've been working on that this piece can fit into, and then I'll put a hinge on the other side. So that's where I'm at with that. I've also gotten 5 arrows done, and those I fletched with feathers from my chickens. And this is just the shish kebab skewer, and I just used a little wood glue on it and glued it to the back here. I think they turned out alright. I did 5. I don't know if I'll make more or not, but I'd like to make a mounting spot for those, and I'm kind of thinking I could use some 1/4-inch tubing and attach it so they can just sit here and held ready for use. So I haven't decided what I'm going to do on that yet, but for now I'm going to work on that rest on the back, and I'm just getting that piece sorted out here. Alright, so I got that rear support bracket in place. I may go back and sand off some of that solder, just because I don't really like the silver part of it. But now I'm deciding how I want to mount the arrows on here. So I'm thinking I made this little piece that I'm going to mount right here. And then I'm using this is actually coax cable. I really like working with this because it's actually copper clad steel, so it's pretty strong, but it will solder. And I'm going to add some little loops where the arrows can just sit in there. Right, well, the build is done. I got that holder for the arrows attached, and those little wires soldered on there for them to sit in. Added this little chain. This was off of a little neck chain that put a little handle on this, the nail that I made for cranking this down, so it doesn't look like a nail as much anymore. Just put some little handle on there. Added a little peg to hang it on. So now I think I'm going to stain it, which is going to be difficult since it's already all put together, all the trim on it and everything, but I couldn't really do it as I went along. So let's get it stained. Decided to go with red mahogany. Nice. That's looking pretty good. Now to work on the top part. Okay, the build is complete. I'm pretty happy with how it turned out. Got it all stained, which was laborious. Let's try it out here quick. So it's made to use this little handle here to crank it back, but I'll just do part of it by hand here. Grab one of the arrows from the rack here. Then when you lift it up, it comes off of that little post there. And you can aim it. And then pretty fun. I'm happy with how it turned out, so I hope you enjoyed it. Thanks for watching. Till next time.